So I just wanted to give you a little tour of the new changes to the garden that we've made in the last couple of months. Just using the drone to fly over the pond and then heading over to the new garden area. So I've still got the existing garden, which I'll come back to later. But I'm just going to hustle over there and take a quick look at some of the changes. One of the things that we did was put in a few apple trees on the kind of just off the property line. We did a little bit of work this spring to find where the property line was, mapping out the corners of the property, and then actually pulling a string right across the whole property to try and outline it. So you can see the property line there marked with some posts and some logs, and we've mowed right to the edge. Those are the new apple trees. We planted those, and those are a gift from Jackie and Joe, mom's sister and brother-in-law, to mark their 51st wedding anniversary, which is pretty cool. So flying in, you can see as you get towards the back of the property that we have a new potato garden. This was kind of a neat area that was well excavated and churned up by the stump remover that we brought in to pull out all the tree stumps that were in back here. So there's some areas that were really nice and loose, and that was one of them. So that was a perfect spot to put 4 different kinds of potatoes in. So they're planted pretty densely, so I'm curious to see if we get just little potatoes or bigger ones, but it might be too dense. We'll see. I'm watering. You can see I've got an irrigation system. That was a big part of the project, was pulling water back to the back side of the property and putting in timers and putting in, all of the drip lines. There's also a garden hose back there that I can use to do some spot watering for carrots and other things that need a little extra water. There's some sunflowers in the bottom left that we're just flying over. There's beets and spinach planted in kind of the road now towards the bottom left. There's bean plants kind of all over the place. And then even before we had put the garden in, we had put some potatoes in. This was all really spur of the moment kind of planting. So we put the potatoes in, and then we were like, oh, let's put the garden in. So that's why things are a little chaotic. You can see a lot of the corn plants that we put in. So there's a lot of sweet corn that we planted in these 3 rows, or 6 rows, I guess. Yeah, I mean, this is all very, very much spur of the moment, trying to figure out what to put in. There were some volunteer tomato plants that we found from last year that had kind of sprung up that I transplanted into the garden. You can see those on the bottom right. And then there's the assorted bean plants, and there was a bunch of squash and other things that I planted that it really didn't do that well, that didn't come up. So in the far row there's some lettuces and other things that are coming up that look really good. The pepper plants in the bottom left are looking really good. The tomatoes are looking really good. Those are all planted from seedlings. And squash, zucchini. There's a rogue raspberry plant that again we had planted in another spot before we had decided to put the garden in. So we'll move that. There are some blueberry plants that are up further towards the middle of the screen right now, up outside of the main garden area. We're going to do a full row of blueberries there. We also need to find a spot for strawberry plants, blackberry plants, and raspberry plants, so we'll figure that out. As we get closer to the fall, we'll do some transplanting. So there's kind of an overview of the new garden area with respect to where the house is, which is right up there. Now you can see the pond, and you can see the existing garden area, so I'm just speeding up the footage a little bit as I fly over to show that garden area. This garden was established about 3 years ago, and I've continued to expand it even outside of the borders that we had put up the fence to keep the deer out. On the new garden we have a plastic deer fence, but this one is chicken wire, so this one's a little more robust. I've got lettuces that we've done a lot of harvesting already, and there's a new batch there on the bottom. There's some green onions and leeks in that bed on the bottom. A lot of carrots still coming out of that bed. More beets in there as well. The main tomato bed is, with the strings are straight ahead there. That's doing real well. Yeah, and you can kind of make out that there's some drip irrigation that I'd put into this bed as well, or into all of this area as well. So there's two different irrigation systems. This one was kind of my first attempt at it, and then I did a different style of drip irrigation in the other garden. So that's part of the newer area up at the top, outside of the fence, where I've done some of the bigger plants like zucchini. There's a lot of raspberry plants around the edge of the garden, and another potato bed, as well as strawberries and blackberries and raspberries that we just flew over down in the bottom bed there. There's some pepper plants. There's a watermelon plant growing in this bed, and a lot of peas that I need to harvest. There's my rain barrel. I need to get a new hose for that, because the hose that I was feeding that rain barrel with, I managed to cut it with my weed trimmer. Anyway, that's where all the new garden space is in the existing garden. Just kind of check out the pond, fly over, check and see if we can see any frogs. The lily pads really filled out in the last 2 years. We brought in, I think, 3 patches, or 3 kind of tubers that have really grown into 3 big patches of lily pads. Actually, there's a 4th one there by the pond now. So yeah, they're really growing and splitting. Sandy's done a really good job of cleaning up all the rocks and all the weeds in there, and we're now doing more planting in there. There's a little bed of new plants in there. What are those called? Anyway, I can't remember.